All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Hi, Pete.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Not a problem.
I can't believe we're almost a year from the last time we talked. This is Portfolio Podcast, talking all about Hamilton County, what's going on in portfolio and real estate. But especially today's topic is the 10% rental cap that you and I got to speak about last year. Can you tell us a little bit about like just the general topic of why we were talking about that last year?
Yeah, sure. We were given from the citizens, we're having a lot of issues with the amount of rental properties, and we're in a number of neighborhoods around the city of Fishers. And it became obvious to us that there was an issue going on, and they wanted us to take a look at it. We did a very deep dive legally on what can be done and what couldn't be done. And our attorneys came back with doing a rental cap and said, look, if we have a rental registry where the people who actually own the properties were registered, we knew who to go to. That was first step. And then looking at the properties that were within those subdivisions where they were over 10% already in terms of rental properties versus owned, right? Because those are the ones we typically have problems with, is what we determined. So we had that piece of legislation for the city of Fishers. It did get, a lot of press, obviously, and we had a lot of people in the audience, probably more so for doing the rental cap than the other way. But then again, I also had lots of calls from the investment community in New York and elsewhere, even the local community, saying you can't do this, you're going to kill us, blah, 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 blah. And it really got in front of council, and council approved it 9-0. I mean, it really wasn't, it was widely accepted, and it was, made the citizens very happy about it once it got done. And then, of course, we had the last session.
Yeah, so the first time we met, and obviously as the president of the city council in Fishers, it was a big deal to have this because this was very avant-garde kind of legislation, would you say? Yes. We were the first city to bring it about in the state or in the nation.
I don't know about the nation, but I certainly know in the state for sure we were the first ones to do it.
Yeah, so and I heard a lot being boots on the ground with all these clients, investors, and landlords, and on the side of people who are trying to get into affordable housing was basically, we're okay with it as long as it was a way to make sure that the people who are renting out their houses are making sure they're taken care of, because absentee owners were causing kind of issues with land prices and valuations, right? Is that kind of the sense you were getting?
Obviously, one of the things that you go into Fishers is not an inexpensive place to go ahead and live, right? I mean, we have a bunch of professionals there for the most part, and there are some neighborhoods which are less expensive than others, obviously, around the city. But it was preventing some people going in because you'd have some kind of first-time buyers trying to go into some first-time neighborhoods, and they couldn't go in fast enough because people were going in with cash offers and immediately taking those properties off the table, and they couldn't get them. So they were complaining as well. So
it was really interesting to see the crowd, lots of different types of people wanting either have some say, and I want the homes around me to be taken care of. And they thought that this was kind of a free way where the city can at least have their pulse on absentee owners who aren't taking care of their yards, maybe affecting values, and then also kind of not allowing investor buyers, or whether they're big companies or just a young professional, to go in and buy homes with cash, because then the first-time buyer home pool, they're not able to access any kind of homes because they're all being sold for investing purposes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there was a lot of reasons we ended up doing it. One of the ones is we didn't know who the owners were. That's number one, right? And you don't know who to go to for all those things that may go wrong, whether it's a condition of the yard or condition of maybe they're putting too many vehicles out and they're kind of harboring vehicles in the side where it's not allowed. The other side of it is, are they paying their stormwater bill? Are they paying their trash bill? Are they paying those things? A lot of times those owners don't do that from the perspective of the rentals, even though it should go right to the rental, because I assume they're triple net leases, right? And all those extra things will come back to the person running the property. And maybe they didn't know that. I'm sure they disclosed it somewhere in the paperwork, but all those things we had to wait at least to go back and say, this is not happening. Right, and that's what the whole point was, trying to do that.
And I like that you also had some kind of paperwork plan where if someone needed to move or had a military, had to sell or had to rent, there was a lot of variances in terms of being leeway in terms of landlords.
There's a lot of carve-outs, for sure. We understand that you have a lot of folks that may be snowbirds. and they go down for the winter and they rent their house out for 3 or 4 or 5 months. We're not going to take that away from somebody. If they're renting to a family member, in other words, you get the parents who own the house. Now the kids have gotten there and they've got kids themselves, etc. They need the bigger house. The parents need a smaller house, but the kids can afford it. So they let them go over in the house and pay a rental. We're not going to stop that either. The military things, or people like with Roche and Eli Lilly, right? They have to do a stint overseas in order to continue to move up in those organizations, right? So all that was allowable. And then there was still a kind of carve out to say, come tell us what your story is. We'll listen to it. And if it makes sense, we'll allow you to rent. It wasn't like we were trying to kill anybody from that standpoint, but we thought it was a pretty reasonable ordinance to put forward.
And so then pretty quickly, Carmel wanted to follow suit. Can you speak on that a little bit?
I had a lot of members from the Carmel City Council call me and ask me for our legislation because they were having the same issue in Carmel. I'm sure they're having the issue other places, but certainly in Carmel with the same type of issue. So we gave them our ordinance. I don't know that they changed it much at all. They put it through the process and passed that one too. I think it was unanimous there as well. So yeah, they had it right behind us.
Yeah, I had a beautiful home, 2-story in Carmel that sold pretty quickly right around Christmas time. And their intent was to try to make sure it could pass into the rental before a cap was passed. So it became a rental, and it was a beautiful home in a great location. So great for that investor, great for somebody who wants to rent a home in Carmel, because that's also kind of hard to find and to do. But now tell us what has happened since.
Well, we had obviously session was in place, and they take on the bills that they take on. One of the bills they took on was this rental cap. And it was argued, I can't remember, I think it was probably the House who brought it up, maybe Senate, I can't remember which one started it, but it made its way through the process to essentially negate any of that legislation that both us and Carmel had, not allowing the rental caps. They didn't say anything about the rental registry. Okay, so I believe that is something we've got our attorneys looking into that and make sure it still complies, that we can still do the rental registry, which we find important. And I believe we've had 95% compliance so far, which is pretty good since it really just started not too long ago. So from that standpoint, we can still allow them, I believe, to register, but we can no longer enforce the cap.
Can anybody enforce the cap?
And currently, there is no cap by the state law. Yeah, state law says no.
What if the president of the HOA says we're going to get together and have a vote?
Great question. The answer is yes. An HOA can go ahead and put in their rules to go ahead and do that. Now, the problem you run into with HOAs is they don't really have there's no hammer to the HOAs really at the end of the day, right? The other problem that you run into with HOAs is if you get too many rentals in that, and to change a bylaw or to change something in their HOA covenants, typically you run into 2/3 majority to vote. I don't know how many HOAs you've been to, but getting anybody to show up at those is problematic. So I believe what was in there as well, as we said, any rental properties were not included in the ability to vote in that HOA. Yeah, because we took that away because there's no true vesting, if you will, with the ownership people there, and we needed them to be able to still manage their business. Like if you go into it and they say, look, we need to increase HOA fees because everything else was getting more expensive. You couldn't do that because they couldn't get enough people there to vote for it. So they were going to start going, non-liquid, right? I mean, they're going to be in a cash problem. So I don't know where that sits, quite frankly. I think they took that part away too, because I still think they're part of it. Now the HOAs maybe can come back with a rule that says if you're a rental property, you're not allowed to vote in the HOA meetings. I think that's probably allowable, but I don't know how much of a kind of a hammer you have to say that's true or not, and what they really can and can't do. I mean, they're not a real enforcing body. They try to be an enforcing body, but they can't even put a lien on a property, I don't believe. I mean, I think they can try, but I think it's problematic.
Bless the HOA volunteers and presidents, because
they think sitting on city council is bad. Try being on an HOA board. Holy cow.
It is hard. It's a hard, thankless job sometimes, but someone's got to do it. And just like the city council leader. So thank you very much. What was like the hubbub in your world about it? Were people upset? Upset about the time and the energy put into this?
I think the answer is yes. Now, the problem you have is most people in Fishers go on through their daily lives and live their life and don't pay a lot of attention to what's going on down the State House. Those of us who watch what's going on down there are highly involved. and try to get things to do the correct thing. And I always point out to our leadership in the legislature that you guys argue with the federal government because they're overreaching and not allowing you guys state rule to do those things. And then you turn right around and you take it away from us, the local people who are there with the boots on the ground. And we're the ones who affect people's lives on a daily basis more than anybody else. But they took that away from us.
Yeah. Do you think that's pretty interesting for them to do that?
I would like to say it's interesting. They do it all the time, quite frankly. And I don't know. Somebody gets kind of an idea that they want to do this, and or you get a lot of lobbying groups. Remember, there's a lot of money which goes on down there, and no one likes to talk about it, but there's a lot of lobby money that goes in. I mean, the real estate group has a big lobby down there, et cetera, et cetera. They spend lots of money on trying to get the right people elected, which will go on to their particular needs and do that. So money was definitely a play for sure as you're looking into going ahead and getting reelected.
Yeah, that's fair. A lot of things that we don't really understand that behind the scenes in the politics and lobbyist groups.
Exactly right.
So it is what it is. It's not going to change back. We tried. We do, at least for the city of Fishers, we have the permitting process. Is that something that is going to be enforceable, or hopefully just to be a standard?
Again, I think if we leave it in as an ordinance, I think we can enforce it. I don't know what the penalties would be. That's what they're looking into currently. If you don't do that, what can be done? I mean, again, until you have some sort of method to go ahead and force people into doing something, or a fine base, right, that says if you don't do it, you're going to be fined. And typically we escalate those, right? You don't charge them, $2,000 on a first offense. You go in there, $250, don't do this again. But if you don't, it escalates up, and that's where you get punitive.
Okay, that makes sense. And in general, do you think for the city of Fishers, what's next? So
we'd still like to go back down to the legislature and try to get them to understand what we were trying to do and have an appreciation for it. If 10% was too low, is there a percentage which would be okay, right? And again, I think you're hearing even from the president who talked about potentially stopping that institutional investor from gobbling up homes. There may be some federal legislation. Who knows what can come on? I mean, I have no idea. At that point, I mean, we all know that there's an affordability crisis. I'm not really sure how you deal with that, because to build a home is not an inexpensive endeavor. And to build a home in Fishers with all the things that we require from a standard basis, I mean, it becomes more problematic. The bigger question for me is that is it necessary for every single community to have affordable housing from soup to nuts for everybody? I don't know that that's actually true. I mean, if we're in a New York City or in an urban environment, to do those rent protection things and those type of methods probably makes a little bit of sense. But there's communities around that these other folks can go look at that they'll find rentals or find cheaper housing or things of that nature. I don't think we need to be all things to all people. That's what I don't believe.
I think that's a fair take, because we sell a lot in Marion County in the investment world, and there's plenty of options there to become a landlord that's pretty affordable, still has a 1% rule, good tenants. Right over 96th Street, over in the Lawrence, there's plenty of options there. So in terms of if you want to invest and not have to worry about this cap, the cap's now going away. We don't have to think about it. Right. But I think everyday homeowners who especially are in the neighborhoods that are affected, they did consider that as a positive. They knew that there weren't going to be 10 cars on the side of the road when they go to sell. Those kind of small everyday things we heard about, right, which kind of triggered this. But I got a lot of calls saying, are we going to work around this 10%? What can we do? And now I'm just telling them, hey, we don't have to worry about it anymore. Right. So that it is what it is.
Remember, a lot of people are moving. You talked about Marion County, and the biggest problem you run into when you're getting people with families particularly is they want to go where the school systems are. That's what they're going for, honestly. They want a good school system for their children. They want their children to be in a school system which is safe and is going to teach them. And unfortunately, Marion County, we all know the problems Marion County has had with the education system. And there's other places which don't have as good of, they're like HSE. I mean, HSE is a phenomenal school system, right, for us in Hamilton County and Fishers particularly, right, that people want to be there. And one of the main drivers is the schools.
Do you think now that, speaking of schools, there is open enrollment available? So you can live in Avon and drive your child to HSE if he's accepted.
If they have room.
If they have room. and if they're accepted.
Well, I don't know about the schools as much as maybe some others, but I think HSE is pretty full, although there is a little bit of a decline in some of the enrollment there. So I don't know if they're going to be taking people in. I'm sure they will. I mean, because remember, they get paid on a per student basis, right? So that's for them. They want to make sure they're at full enrollment, continue to do that. I think with the other bill that came into play, the previous one with those property tax caps, which also played into that hurt the schools big time. And it didn't do a lot for the municipalities either. There was the law from the previous session, which came in, which everybody was kind of reeling from. And, it's kind of died down a little bit, but it really hasn't died down for us because in my regular work, we've got to deal with that all the time. They don't have the money to do the things they would normally do because it was taken away due to the property tax caps.
Yeah, my son's at Fall Creek Intermediate, and he was housed in learning his math in the library with no ceiling, and the recess was outside, and the gym was, classrooms. And I said, well, that's just life, right? They're trying to incorporate these changes and elevate the schools, but it takes a lot of money and takes a lot of time.
It does take on. These things are not inexpensive to build either. And the problem is you can't overbuild them. I mean, if you look at the student enrollment like a meal through a snake, I mean, if there's just a bulge which is coming, the way you handle the bulge is you put trailers out there and you deal with it and then you come back.
My kiddo was also at Southeastern Elementary in trailers first year. Can you talk about the growth over on that side of Fishers at all with HHAH, the new Meyer going over?
Yeah, there's a lot going on over there. If you looked at the kind of the open land which we had in Fishers to do some of those major ones, and actually over where I live, over by the sledding park over there, Flat Fork Creek, and there's a lot of room there. They're going to put a lot of houses in there, which is obviously going to drive enrollment, and that's really where most of the growth is. The growth is not so much downtown, even though everybody says you're putting in too many apartments. I can talk about that too, but the fact of the matter is that it's not driving kids into school because they're smaller apartments. They're 1 and 2 bedrooms. They're not 3 bedrooms and bigger. So you typically don't find families doing that.
Yeah, the growth over by the Schoolhouse Cafe in Flat Fork, Grantham, Flat Fork neighborhood. What else is over there? The new Meyer being built up. I hear a lot of everyone's excited for the new Meyer, the groceries. But I'm glad you guys built that roundabout ahead of time because I was just over there the other day and I thought, man, this area has grown so much. It looks really good too, and I'm really excited about what it can do. But I also know that the schools are probably feeling that impact.
Oh, for sure.
And their hands are tied if property taxes are capped for them too.
They're mostly getting funded by state sales tax, right? The property tax, which used to fund a lot of the schools, only covers bond payments for buildings and transportation. That's all that does. So, but it's still, it affects them big because they had bond payments which were lined up to make from property taxes, and then also the property taxes are cut. And are they going to be able to go ahead and continue to make those bond payments, or are they going to have to renegotiate the bonds? Great question. That's more for the schools than us, but it's problematic.
Good to know. Well, let's talk about downtown development. We'll end there because I love the city of Fishers and I love what's happening downtown. I've been watching it slowly and surely. And now we're seeing, the South Village is turned up. We have Tiburon, the new restaurant there. And then we also now have the City Walk development is going up downtown. What else are you seeing and feeling? What's the hubbub?
I think you'll continue to see a lot of stuff that's happening right there on 116th Street in downtown. I think there's still some open properties there. I can't really say a lot more about that, but it's not public yet. But I think you'll see a lot more development going along in there. You have Corby Thompson's right next to, Chatham Tap over there. That's pretty close to going. That's been there for a while. Corby, I think, has a builder in there, which is going to go ahead and finish that off.
What's the product going to be there?
I think it's going to be mostly probably townhomes. For the most part, I think there may be some single family towards the back. I'm not positive. I haven't seen it yet. It's supposed to come in front of the PUD and Planning Commission, which I sit on as well, here in the next month or two. So I'll know more when I get it.
Well, I'll bother you in a month or two. I always want to get in the know, so our people be in the know. We love selling and living and loving on Fishers, and we really appreciate you always being willing to take our calls anytime. You're so accessible as a leader in our city, and that's really helped our business grow. Whenever we have real estate issues, you're always willing to help. So thank you for coming.
No, not a problem. Happy to do it. And great to see you.
Yes, you too. We'll talk soon. All right. Thank you, everybody.